Hi guys, Alex here from Ornament Designs, and it's time for the Q&A video I promised you. Now, I didn't get a lot of questions, but I got enough to make a pretty good video, so here we go. So the first question I'm going to answer is my friend Sandy's, and she asked me if the fabric bolts in Japan were smaller than fabric bolts in the United States. And after some clarification, I realized that she was talking about my fabric that I have here up on my shelf. Now, I actually make these myself. I buy fabric in the normal way. You know, I actually buy it by meters here instead of yards. But, you take the big giant bolt up to the counter and you tell them how many meters you want and they cut it out for you. But when I get it home, I have a bunch of pieces of cardboard from boxes. Let me just show you one of the pieces of cardboard that I use. Okay, so this is just a piece of cardboard from a box that I had, and I just cut it out, and it's the perfect size for my shelf, and I can just wrap the fabric around the cardboard and stick a pin in the top and then just put it right on my shelf, and it's kind of perfect, and it is a nice way to display my fabric so I can see everything that I have, and also it's a nice way to store fabric. I've tried so many different ways of storing fabric, and this is the best. The only problem that I've discovered with this method of storing fabric is that when behind me I've got this window here, and when the sun comes in through the window and hits the fabric, I actually end up with this edge here actually fades over time. So if I have some fabric that I haven't used in a while that's been sitting there for a long time, I'll get it out and I'll open it up and there'll be a big strip of like pink where it should be red or something. And that's kind of a problem. And I'm sure actually I could solve that by putting something over the top of it. I don't know. I just haven't I haven't really bothered with it. So anyway, so if you need a nice way to store your fabric, I definitely suggest this. Yeah, so anyway, I hope that answers your question, Sandy. So the next set of questions actually are going to require some show and tell with a ball. So I'm going to set my camera up on my table so that I can show you close up of what I'm doing with a foam ball. Elizabeth emailed me and asked me if I could make a close-up video of placing and spacing the sequins. So one of the things I discovered when I was filming this is that if I use a metallic sequin, the light reflects very strongly and you can't really see what I'm doing. So I tried to find the least light reflective sequins that I have, and so I ended up with these sort of satin finish orange sequins. And as you can see, I am overlapping the sequins a little bit. If you're using a bead on your pin, then it's really hard to overlap it too much. You can only overlap so much before you end up hitting the edge of one sequin ends up hitting the bead on the sequin next to it. The goal in overlapping the sequins is so that the foam behind doesn't show through in your finished product. You want to get the sequins close enough together and overlapping enough that none of that foam will show when you're done. So I hope that helped, Elizabeth. So the next several questions come from Karen, and the first thing she asked me was how I draw a design on the ball. When I'm drawing a picture like this cross, the first thing that I do is draw the picture on a piece of paper first. And then I cut the picture out, and then I use that cutout shape to then trace onto the foam ball. So let me show you how that's done. Using a couple of pearl head pins, I pin the shape onto the ball, and I use the equator mold line as a guide to keep things nice and straight. You don't need a lot of pins. And once you have things pinned down like you want, you'll get your pen and just trace around the edge. And it doesn't have to be perfect. It just can be kind of a rough trace. Now this method is for picture drawing only. If I'm doing a geometric design, it's usually plotting points and either using my measuring tape as a straight edge or using a compass to draw curves. And sometimes I do just hand draw things straight on the ball, but usually that's when I have no intention of recreating that exact same design. I'm finished tracing, so I'm going to take out my pins, and there's my shape. Pretty easy. The next thing that Karen asked was, how do I cut? Do I pull the knife through, or do I just go up and down when I'm cutting out my shape for a kimekomi ball? So I use this slider knife, and I only slide out about 1 centimeter of blade. So there's really no way that I can cut too deep into the ball. That's the first thing. And then using an up and down motion. So, and almost like here, I'm just kind of punching in little cuts around those tight corners. And I'm just using sort of an up and down, almost like a sawing motion. It's pretty impossible to just pull the knife through the foam. The foam is too dense to do that, or you could say, I suppose you could say, the knife is not sharp enough to do that. But I think that if the knife was that sharp, I'd be scared to use it. So anyway, so it's, yeah, kind of an up and down sort of, almost like punching these little straight little holes. And when you go around little corners like this, I don't actually push the whole blade down into it. I just push just a little bit. So it's actually less than 1 centimeter deep at those points. Then of course, I always recommend taking your tucking tool and running it through the grooves, because sometimes when you're doing that up and down or punching kind of motion with your knife, you kind of miss a space. And so when you try to drag your tucking tool through the grooves, you can tell if you haven't cut somewhere quite enough, if it doesn't run smoothly through there. The last thing that Karen asked was, when tucking the fabric into the grooves, how do I keep it from getting bigger and wider as I go along? So Karen's problem is that as she's tucking, her grooves get so wide that the cord ends up getting sort of lost in the crevice when she's gluing the cord. So she asks, how can she prevent this? In answering Karen's question, I'm going to continue on with the same ornament that I've been working on, and I'm going to use this lovely gold satin to cover these crosses. When I first started making these ornaments, I tried every kind of tucking tool you can imagine. I tried a metal nail file. I tried an awl for that I use in scrapbooking for punching holes in paper. I used so many different things, and this was the best tool that I could find. This is an upholstery needle, and the reason I like it is because it has a really fine point on the end, and it's not too thick, so it doesn't widen the grooves very much as I'm tucking in my material. The other thing I discovered is not only does your tucking tool matter, but also the type of fabric that you're using. So if you're using a really thick fabric like denim, you're going to have more fabric to stuff in those grooves, and therefore it's going to widen those grooves. So I guess my advice is to try to find the thinnest, smallest point tucking tool that you can find. Even if you can't find an upholstery needle, I recommend trying to find something of this shape, and that may be part of your problem. Now, if you are using an upholstery needle, then it could be the way that you're using your upholstery needle. As you can see here, I'm sort of punching in the fabric. I'm not using a smooth motion. I'm using sort of a punching type motion. And I'm not really putting very much into the groove at this point. I'm just trying to get the basic shape along so that I can then go back with my scissors and trim off all of that excess. So let me skip ahead and show you that part. All right, so here I'm trimming my fabric into this basic shape. And as you can see, I'm not leaving a whole lot of fabric on the edges to tuck into the grooves. I'm leaving very little fabric, as little as I possibly can, because the more fabric you have to tuck into the grooves, of course, the wider they're going to be. And I didn't cut these grooves here on this part of the shape very deeply, so I can't put too much fabric into those grooves anyway, because I don't have a full centimeter. I have probably less than a half a centimeter, actually. So again, I'm sort of punching the fabric in, sort of just poking it in there. And I don't know if you can tell by the video, but I'm really trying to be as delicate as possible, and I'm really taking my time with it. When I do a straightforward ornament with just simple divisions, you know, simple straight lines, then I can go pretty fast and I don't have to be really precise. But when I'm doing a shape like this, I've really got to take my time with it. I've got to be really delicate. I can't use too much pressure with my hands, because that will, if I use too much pressure and my hand slips and I make a mistake, then I might punch a hole in my ball where I don't want a hole to be. So I have to be really careful when I'm doing a design like this. So one more thing I'm going to mention about the tucking tool that I forgot to before is that it's not just about how thin your tucking tool is. It's not just about how fine a point it has on it. It's also about how strong it is. So if I wanted the thinnest, finest point I could find, of course I'd use just a regular needle. But a regular needle isn't strong enough and it's not long enough to grip. So you've really got to have something that's long enough to grip and that's strong enough to not bend under pressure. And here is what it looks like when I've got all of my fabric tucked around the cross. Now I didn't time myself, but I'm guessing that it took me at least an hour just to cover this one shape with fabric. Now on to my last question. This comes from Charlotte, and she asked me about attaching a tassel. So I'm going to show you two different types of tassels. So for this ornament here, this is an older ornament that I have. I made this little tassel with just 2 strings and 2 beads that are hanging down. And I used my cord to do this, and it's actually really, really easy. So let me show you how I do that. Okay, so the first thing I do is I thread a piece of cord through a bead and I tie off the end. and then I try to snip it off so there's not a big string hanging down below the cord. Okay, and then I decide how long I want my little tassel to be, and I cut off my ribbon, and I thread another bead onto that end and make another knot. Okay, like that. Then I decide on how I want it to be. I usually like to do them, one side is a little bit shorter than the other side, and I just pinch it to make a crease, and then where that crease is in the cord, I thread the cord onto a pin that also has a sequin on it, and then I pin all of that to the bottom or south pole of my ball. And here's just a ball that I'm in the middle of working on at the moment. And there is my tassel. So that is super, super easy. And that's how I do just a simple beaded tassel. You can add more strings if you want. You can, use a different kind of thread. Of course, you need something thick enough that you can put a pin through it. That's the only thing with this kind of tassel. Okay, so on to the second kind of tassel, and you can buy these online or in a craft store. I actually found mine in Chinatown here in Yokohama where I live, and I really liked it because it has that neat knot at the top of it. So I've got a ball here with my grooves already cut. It's just a simple 4 division with my equator line also cut. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take the hanging ribbon of my tassel and stuff it into the grooves of my ball, like this. And I'm going to make sure that I stuff the string way down in there to get it as deep as possible, because after I'm done with this, I'm going to put the fabric over the top of it and it's going to hold it in there. And here I kind of feel like I've got the tassel a little bit too loose. I want it kind of tight right up against the bottom of the ball. So I'm just going to adjust it like this. And once you've got it all adjusted, you just take that extra loose string that you have and stuff it back into the grooves. Now I have a roughly cut out piece of silk material here. Actually, it's just a scrap, and I'm going to use this to quickly just tuck in right over where I also tucked in the string for my tassel. And tucking in this fabric is going to hold that string in place. And that is basically the best way, I think, to put a tassel on a kimekomi ball. So of course, this is just one way to attach a tassel. There are a lot of ways to do it. I've seen people pin them on. If you're lucky enough to have foam balls that have a hole drilled all the way through the center, you can stick that hanging string through the center of the ball and pin it down somehow or something. I don't use tassels very often, so I haven't really figured out all of the ways to attach them. This is just one way that I've figured out that I really like. So if other ornament artists out there, if you know of some really good ways to attach a tassel, I would love it if you would leave us some comments and let us know how you do it, because I could really use the help too, honestly. And now I thought I'd show you some of my finished products here. Here's the cross ball that I was working on. And one thing I should mention while we're looking at this finished ornament here is you'll notice that all of the sharp corners that were in the original picture have been lost in our final product, which is just the nature of the kimekomi ornament. You just cannot preserve sharp corners. It's pretty much impossible. They get lost in the tucking process. And here is the tassel ball that I was working on. As you can see, I made a little bit of a change. I added a bead onto the tassel string. So that's all, folks. Thank you so much for watching. And I really hope I answered all of your questions. If I missed something, please leave me a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And I'm sure that you're probably not the only one with that question, so don't be shy. So thank you so much. Bye.